Welcome to the CMO Spotlight, and I'm here with Amy Comeau, who is the Vice President of Marketing for Emory Healthcare. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Joe. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. We're both aspiring authors right now and working on our first books. But that's not the reason I had you here today. What I really want to talk to you about is um, if you could tell us a little bit more about Emory Healthcare, the organization, and then we'll talk a little bit more about your role as Vice President of Marketing there.
Yeah, sure. Sounds great. So Emory Healthcare is the largest academic health system in the state of Georgia, where there are other health systems that are non-academic that will say they're larger than we are, and they are truly by number of hospitals, but we're the only academic in the state. We have 11 hospitals. We've got more than 4,000 physicians, 400 plus locations from, up and coming all the way actually down to LaGrange, and then a joint venture in Columbus, Georgia, with St. Francis Hospital down there. We have the only NCI designated cancer center in the state of Georgia. So that means NCI is the National Cancer Institute, and that's a very elite designation given by the National Cancer Institute, which is a national program for cancer institutes that are at the top of their game when it comes to research, discovery, treatment, et cetera. So we're a fairly large system. And as I mentioned, we're the only nationally recognized academic health system in the state of Georgia.
Wow. And you have been, we'll talk about your career path in a minute, but you've been there 17 plus years and now serving as Vice President of Marketing. So tell us a little bit about what that role entails for you and maybe even a little about your team.
Yeah, sure. So as Vice President of Marketing, my team handles really all things patient acquisition, retention, and loyalty. We recently took on recruitment marketing and employer branding. I mean, when I say recently, just in January, so it's a new it's a new world for us there. Website, social media, content design, brand architecture, even direct to physician marketing, in addition to direct to consumer marketing, pretty much everything except media relations and internal communications. So there's a separate team. There's a VP of comms who's my partner. We both report to the CEO, but we partner when we have overlap there. The other thing that my team does, it's unusual. I shouldn't say unusual, but it's different than others, is that I also have a community engagement on my team. So I have a director of community engagement. So community engagement and sports partnerships are also part of what we do. And so we look at it from what's the marketing side of community engagement, like what markets do we want to have a bigger marketing presence in, all the way to health equity. And we partner with our Chief Diversity and Equity Inclusion Officer and our Chief Transformation Officer on where we need to be focused on health equity as well.
Excellent. And so, in terms of all of that work is done by roughly how many people? Like how many people are in the marketing
So
organization?
we have about 27 people on the marketing side of the house. I'm not exactly sure how many are on the comms side when you add them all up, but I've shared this in context. So I remember presenting at, I think it was a GSHMPR, like a Georgia Hospital Association marketing PR conference, saying that we had a small but mighty team. And apparently all the onesie twosie hospitals that have just like one or two people are like, oh, we would kill to have as many people
Right,
as.
right.
But compared to systems our size, we're fairly small. We're fairly small compared to other systems our size.
Absolutely. So, let's talk a little bit about your career path. I know you got your undergraduate degree at Northwestern up in Chicago, and then you went into the working world, I think, for an opera first,
Correct.
or your first gig, and then you went to work for the Atlanta Opera specifically, and then eventually you went back to get your MBA from Emory University. But so tell us a little bit about the journey that led to Emory Healthcare, and then you had a lot of different roles
Yeah.
leading up to the VP of marketing.
Yeah. So my journey is unusual. I mean, it's like I feel like I'm a unicorn sometimes in the space that I'm in. So I started out, did my undergrad with all intents of being a vocal performance major. Quickly learned that although that would sound like a great idea when I was 18, it was going to be very hard to actually literally sing for your supper.
Right.
on a reliable basis. So I switched my major. Stayed in music, but I got a Bachelor of Arts in Music. And then what Northwestern calls it a certificate, but for all intents and purposes, it's a minor in music business. So I got to
Hmm.
take classes out of Kellogg, which Medill, like just I took a lot of marketing and advertising classes and business organization classes when I was at Northwestern. So I got a job right out of school working as an administrative assistant for Lyric Opera Chicago, which looking back really shaped how I approach marketing even to this day.
Hmm.
Worked for 2 years in there, and then was fortunate to get, I applied for and was accepted as one of four individuals in all of North America to participate in Opera America's fellowship program, which was a program to develop the next generation of opera managers and leaders. So not singers, but the people who are behind the scenes. And so I had opened up a whole new world to me that yes, you can still be in music, but not be on stage. And that it takes a whole, it takes the whole organization to be able to put forward what you see on stage. So I spent a year studying with different opera companies, Seattle Opera, Atlanta Opera, and then a small opera festival in upstate New York called Lake George Opera Festival. And I was fortunate that both Seattle and Atlanta offered me jobs at the end of it. So I chose Atlanta because it was East Coast. And I mean, I love them both, but my whole
Were
family
you
was up.
from Chicago originally?
No, I grew up in Buffalo, New
Buffalo.
York.
Okay, 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 okay.
Yeah, so my whole family's East Coast, and I was like, when you work for an
Yeah.
opera company, you're not making big bucks, and I was like, I can't afford to take all the travel, like take an extra day for cross country travel, and then the cost of flights. So I was like, it's too much to try and live at that time in my career on the West Coast. So I
Yeah.
picked Atlanta. I thought I'd only be here for a few years, and that I would grow my career by hopping to other companies, bigger roles at the same company, smaller companies, etc. I was fortunate to grow my career at the Atlanta Opera, going from PR and promotions manager to become the director of marketing and communications, and also manage all of the ticketing for the Atlanta Opera. But found that my career path took came to a bit of a screeching halt right after September 11th. So September
Hmm.
11th hurt the arts industry in Atlanta in particular. There's a whole book there. There literally is a book about about that, but that's a whole other story. And so I ended up, I was unemployed for a few months, and I'd never been unemployed before, never lost my job. It was a very traumatic time in my career. And so I ended up fortunate landing with Georgia State University and working for the Rialto Center for the Performing Arts for about 18 months there. Loved the people and loved the work that we were producing, but it was a roadhouse where you would have, like, we were marketing people like Bobby McFerrin and Herbie Hancock, but I never got to know them. When I was at the
Hmm.
opera, the artists would be in residence for a whole month, and I'd really get to know them. And so it was just a different experience, and it was a lot of work. So I was like, you know what? I think it's time. After I got married, I found myself working Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like for 8 weeks straight. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm done with these nights and weekends. So I was like, it's time for me to start shifting. So I started applying randomly online way back in the day, before Indeed and before Glassdoor and before, I don't even think Monster.com exists anymore, but all that stuff. And got a call from Emory saying that they wanted to do a phone screener with me. And long story short, I ended up getting the job as the director of communications for the nursing school at Emory. A couple of moments I speak of about divine intervention that kind of led up to that. The woman that did the phone screener for me happened to be a season ticket holder at the Rialto. So I think
Uh,
she was curious. She's like, oh, I'll interview her. I didn't know her, but she's like, oh, that was fun. And then when I got to the nursing school, it turns out that the dean of the nursing school, her sister was an opera singer. Again, not
hmm.
anybody that I knew, but it was like just enough those like little connections that that made my resume stand out, and enough people like,
Yeah.
to talk with her. And then of course I did all the work to, earn the job, but it was interesting to get there. And then I've been at Emory ever since. I mean, I can talk a little bit about kind of I'll be at Emory 20 years in May, so I can talk about the 20 years. I never thought I would be at Emory or in healthcare at all when I was at Northwestern, and now here I am 20 years, and it's the longest I've ever worked somewhere.
Well, you said something that I think is an insight that I don't know if I want people to pick up on, which is sometimes it's worth being interesting, right? And just
Yeah.
having some things in your background that make you interesting,
Right,
Because, for example, to your point, your opera background and, both singing and working in the opera business, while it didn't get you a job, it made you interesting enough for somebody to have a conversation with
right,
you. And it led
right.
to conversation, which led to other things, which is
Yeah,
great. So, it's do things that stimulate you and that are valuable and important to you, and then they'll probably be interesting to at least some other people.
right, right. No, it's absolutely true. I mean, I remember when I was meeting with the dean, she basically said, well, if you can sell not opera, because I think I asked her the question, I'm like, why, how did my resume, like, how am I here? Like, I'm like, I think
Yeah,
it's fantastic. I'm here for a final interview, but what was it? She's like, well, we kind of figured if you could sell opera, surely you could sell nursing. And
yeah.
so, and it's also having a passion about something. I mean, I learned so much work in the 2 years that I worked at Lyric Opera Chicago, and in the years I worked in opera since then, just around so much around marketing, season tickets, subscription sales. So I bring a subscription mindset to the work I do. So
Hmm.
people talk about brand marketing or performance marketing. My experience is on the performance marketing side. I didn't know that's what it was called at the time, but it's all
Yeah,
about getting people to try you and then try you again and getting them to be loyal.
I love that. All right, I'm curious if there's a piece of advice that either you wish you'd gotten early in your career, or maybe you would dispense to somebody that's pretty young in their marketing career.
Yeah, I don't know if it's what I wished I had gotten earlier in my career, because I think right there are times when I wished that I had taken marketing classes or done more with marketing and business development earlier on in my
Mm,
career. Because I see, I've always only worked in nonprofit, and so I see people that come out of like P&G or Coca-Cola, and I'm like, wow, I wonder what
yeah,
that road
yeah.
would have been like. But that's not the road that I took. And so people ask me, well, how did you get where you are? And I said, you have to have a plan, but you also have to know that the plan you have may not work out. All right. And
Hmm.
so to recognize those pivot points. And so after I lost my job, I was like, okay, I got to start to figure out, what's my career viability? Because working in the arts, even though I loved it, I knew it's very fickle, right? Based off of, how the economy is doing, and, whether, people have disposable income to go to the opera or the symphony. So when I went to the Rialto, I thought, what I liked about it was that it gave me a couple of options out, like pathways out. Not that I was planning on leaving the Rialto, but what is that experience going to give me?
Yeah.
So, it kept me having the experience within healthcare, right? And so I could, or not healthcare, within the performing arts. Then it was also working with a major or a major academic institution. So I'd never worked in higher education. So I started to learn around how higher education would work. And it was not, it was a different type of arts organization. So while it didn't produce its own content, we hired in acts. That meant that I could then instead of going to work for like a symphony or an orchestra, I could look at some of these like concert halls or that way. So I'm like, okay, there's three different paths out. Plus, I could potentially go on agency side. So I'm like, all right, I know now that by moving here, it's giving me a new experience, and I'm going to be learning a lot of different things, and it's giving me 3 to 4 ways that I could take my career. Same thing
Hmm.
happened when I got to Emory. I was like, okay, having had some academic experience being at Georgia State was a connection to Emory, and then being at Emory, I was like, okay, I could go back into the performing arts. I could go into healthcare. I could go into stay within academics. Like there were a lot of different paths that I could take. And so it's just recognizing that, and then as the moment inflection points come in your career, it's being wise enough to recognize them and determine which ones you want to act on.
100%. So I believe everybody has a superpower, and I'm curious what your superpower is.
It's a good question, and I would say I've been described a lot as a collaborative leader. Um, I also remember at very young that my friends called me Kami, not like as in Kami, but like Calmy. Like I always had a very even
Mm,
demeanor. And so I think that my superpower is a way that I can relate to a lot of people, and and I'm very collaborative. So this is going to sound corny, but I see the good in everybody. Like I'm always assuming goodwill and figuring out, okay, how can we bring people together that maybe not on the same frame of mind or just don't really understand it. And that's what we have to do in marketing, is that we're working with different parts of the organization and having to bridge them together. And so I think that's one of the things that I do really well.
Great. So I'm curious if there's some specific values that you want to demonstrate as a leader, or maybe there are values you would demand for somebody to be a part of your team.
Yeah. So what I try and demonstrate as a leader is, for me, one of my core values is family first. And I mean that in that I am not afraid to say that I don't need to leave early today because I'm going to my son's varsity soccer game, or I'm taking this day off because of something I'm doing with my son. I'm not afraid to share that and say that's why I can't be at a meeting or I can't be somewhere, because I want my team to understand that they can do that too. They need to.
Mhm.
The worst thing is when people tell me I'm going to be on PTO, I'm going away, but I'll be available by phone. I said, no, you're not. Like, no, I'll be available. I'm like, no, you won't. So turn off your email. You're not going to be available by phone. If it's a real emergency, we'll find you, but otherwise you're not going to unplug if you don't actually
Yeah.
get. So to me, that's really important. Um, as you talked about what value I want to see in people that work for me, resourcefulness,
Mm.
100% resourcefulness. If somebody says, I don't know where to find this, I'm like, you haven't looked for it. If you've looked for it and you still can't find it, then let me know. But there's so much at our fingertips and so much that you can figure out, that if you're waiting for somebody to tell you where something is, you're going to get swept over. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So there's people who I've found have been resourceful, who aren't afraid to tackle the small projects and the big projects, are the ones that I value on my team. And often I see moving on to greater success.
Mhm. So here at Setup, we're marketing matchmakers, and that typically means we connect brands and marketing agencies together. So we're not a brand, we're not a marketing agency. We live in that space in between.
Yeah.
So that gives us real perspective on understanding both brands and agencies and how they interact with each other. So
Yeah.
I'm curious of just how you work with marketing agencies generally.
Yeah. Often we're working with an agency to fill a void we don't have on the team. As I mentioned, we are sparsely staffed on our team, compared to systems our size. And so therefore, roles that we might actually prefer to have embedded on our team, we don't have the FTEs to be able to do that. So we look to agencies to fill those gaps. Our biggest agency that we work with is our agency of record. And so we work with them on strategic marketing, creative production and development, and media buying. So that's like the standard go-to. And we've been with them for about 8 years now. But there's some other agencies that we work with. We used to insource our paid search, and then somebody went on maternity leave and didn't come back. And so we ended up just keeping that outsourced.
Mhm.
The jury's still out on whether that should be outsourced or insourced, but that's one that we work with, is with an outside agency. And then a lot of our web support and tech stack support, we work with external agencies on. And another agency we work with on content writing, because we don't have any on-staff writers as much as I would like to have them.
Are there certain disciplines of marketing that you feel you would always, not always is a strong
Yeah.
word, but that you would almost always want to outsource because you want that outside perspective? And are there certain other disciplines of marketing that you really feel you've got to own within the team?
Yeah, I would say for me, I think media buying, it changes so
Hmm.
fast. I mean, just from, it used to just be the 4 or 5 television stations, and now like we've got everything plus, Paramount Plus and ESPN Plus and Disney Plus. Like I wouldn't even know how to begin to go about buying all of that media. So I think
Right.
media buying, having somebody who's specialized in that and understands it and can keep up with everything that's changing, I mean, on a monthly basis, I think is critical and important. I would say from the tech stack side of the house, there is an expertise out there also that you have to lean on. I mean, it would be unusual to be able to, unless you had a huge in-house team that you could grow and also spend the dollars to make sure that they're staying up with all the technology changes.
Yeah.
And I think that is also an area that is ripe for finding a collaborative partner.
So as marketers, we often have to work with the non-marketing functions within our organizations, and sometimes those non-marketing functions deem themselves amateur marketers. But I'm curious, how do you show the value of marketing to the non-marketing functions that might just think of marketing as, a cost center?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's the perpetual question, right? That's the big challenge I think that we all have as marketers. And I would say the answer depends on kind of who it is you're trying to convince. There's some people, I think, when you can just show them where you have numbers and you can show ROI, and you can show before and after, that's always most compelling. But sometimes, that's not what they're looking at, because they're looking at visibility and awareness, and
Right.
that harder to demonstrate. I mean, the joke is, and I think this is also a joke probably outside of the healthcare industry, but that every physician wants a billboard, but
Mm,
nobody's making their decision on where to go for healthcare based off of a billboard.
right.
Sure, is the billboard with this bill? I talk about the bullseye. Would a billboard be in my overall toolkit if I had like unlimited resources? Sure, but it'd be an outer ring. It's not where I'm going to
Yeah.
invest my first set of dollars, right? We're going to invest our first set of dollars at the point of conversion, and then grow outward towards that. So awareness is always a challenge, because you can build awareness, but it's not going to translate to volume necessarily.
Right. Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
And so it is a both and.
I'm curious if there's a program or a campaign or something that you were a part of that taught you a valuable lesson, either because it was a flop and it taught you something you're like, I need to learn that thing, or maybe it was a huge success and it's something you would want to emulate again in the future.
Yeah. There's probably, I can give you one, I'll give you one in each, and you can
Okay,
decide
great.
what you. So
We'll
there
use
was,
both.
yeah, there was one that was a total flop. And this is when I was working at the opera, and we didn't have very big budgets. And normally we would we would have television advertising running on cable, and kind of having it going throughout, like maybe 6 months during the season, or while we're selling our season tickets. And the reach and frequency there, it wasn't as much, it was distributed, right? It was across a time period. And I remember meeting with somebody from one of the broadcast news channels, and they said, "Oh, no, you're going to get better reach and frequency if we just blast the market for 2 weeks." And I said, "Okay, let's give it a shot." But I basically took all my TV dollars out of cable into a 2 week blast for a broadcast. And what I thought we were going to see was like gigantic sales. And then we didn't have any, it didn't work. It was wasted effort. So it taught me a lesson in, the ad rep's not always correct. But B,
They
you
have an
have
agenda. Right,
they
right,
have
right,
an
right.
agenda, but B, you also have to know what are you trying to accomplish, and what works. And this was back in the mid 90s, where we didn't have all the tools and technology. The only way you could tell something worked was whether the phone rang, right? We weren't even
Right,
doing
right, right,
that
right,
at
right.
one time. So yeah, so that was a valuable lesson, and I've never done that ever again. But from a campaign that was super successful, there was there was one that we did more recently. It was pre-pandemic, and it was when we really looked at how do we bring, when we brought on our new agency, and it's like, how do we make sure that we're telling the story of the Emory brand overall, and the different service lines that we have, but in a way that is not chest beating and talking, and doesn't look like, all the hospital advertising you're going to see with somebody on a gurney, or people running down the hall, and a doctor, in a mask, or that kind of stuff. And so we really did a lot of research to brand the user, kind of like choosy moms choose Jif, like that kind of
Yeah,
concept, right? And so we focused on telling the story, not from a patient testimonial, but as a person just walking down the street,
yeah.
about talking about, if you or someone you love need cancer, or here's what Emory's all about. And so we did that, and there was a big advertising, a broadcast advertising campaign that went with that. But then we layered in with that, our performance marketing, so paid search, email marketing, direct mail marketing, direct to physician marketing, and we were able to build this campaign in a way that was quite successful. We saw the largest call volumes we'd seen in a while. We got a lot of great feedback about employee pride. Our development office and our careers offices said they saw increases in donations and also applications. That wasn't an intended target of the campaign, but a well-done campaign will hit many different metrics for you, even if you're only targeting one. So I'd say that was a successful one for us.
Awesome. So I want to wrap things up with a couple of just quick rapid fire fun questions. The first is there a book or a quote or a movie or a sports team or a band that you love and that inspires you? And what is it about that thing that inspires you most?
Yeah, well, so when you said a quote, the one that I rely on to this day is one from my mother, and
Hmm.
I'm the oldest of three girls, and so as the oldest, you end up becoming the instigator in a lot of, sibling fights.
Yeah.
And she finally said, she would say this to me all the time, and I'm like, okay, whatever, mom. She's like, Amy, it stops with the more mature. And so I take that
Huh.
with me, and maybe that's why I'm such a collaborative leader. Yeah, you can spend your time arguing with somebody, but it's not going to stop until somebody is an adult and shows up in the room, you know?
Yeah.
And so for me, it stops with the more mature has been something, it's been something I come back to over and over again. And I have used it when I've had to coach my team members that are, either intra-team conflicts or, inter-team conflicts, between marketing and somewhere else. I'm like, I can't change, I can't change that person. So think about how you can change
Hmm.
your your approach for a better outcome.
This might be our 100th CMO Spotlight interview, and that may be the first person to quote a parent for their
Really?
quote. So I love that. I
I'll
love
be
that.
yes. I don't know that
Uh,
she even knows that I say that, but yeah.
well, then now she does. So
Yeah.
other than your family, which is an easy answer, I'm curious where you find joy outside of work. Like, do you still sing, or what other hobbies or things do you do?
Yeah, I don't sing as much. I used to sing, but once my son started getting into soccer, and I was fortunate to get into the leadership role I'm in, it was too hard to keep that up. So for me, for fun, we are big Atlanta United season ticket holders, so
Mm,
love going to the games. I am a sports junkie. I love
mm,
watching sports on TV. It's now more than ever, it's my way of actually relaxing at the end of the day. Like something about watching a ball or go back and forth. I don't know if there's something like geometric about it, but I just can relax. So I watch a lot of Braves game to my family's chagrin. I watch a lot of Braves, Falcons. I'm a big, big, big Bills fan. Because I'm born and bred in Buffalo.
yeah,
You are a Bills
Bills
fan.
Mafia, right?
Oh yeah, Mafia all the way. So I watch a lot of sports, including my son playing. And then I like to cook. I'm not the cook, I'm not the chef in the family. I'm more the sides and the baker. So my husband and I have
Mm.
split it up where he's got his, outdoor grill kitchen, and he does the proteins and the meats, and I do the veggies and the
You're the sous chef.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, last question. I'm curious if there's a brand that you've never worked on that you really admire, and what is it about the brand that you admire?
Publix. I will
Hmm.
tell you this. Yeah, it was fine. We had this exercise at a retreat that my team had a couple weeks ago, and I said the Bills because it was the first thing that came into my mind, and
Hmm.
just 'cause I'm a Bills fan. But as people were going around the room, I was really thinking, actually Publix. I mean, Disney's the easy answer, but I love Publix because we have been living in the same place for so we've been married 20 years, so we've been here in the same house for 20 years. I remember when the Publix up the street was built, it didn't exist, and we used to have to drive for up, about 10, 15 minutes to get to the closest grocery store, which is a Kroger. And once this Publix opened, I mean, they know us. There are people that are still working there today that when it opened.
Wow.
And so they saw me pregnant with Josh. They see Josh coming in, and when Josh now decides to come to the grocery store with us, which is like 0 times, but then when he comes in, there's somebody who's there. They're like, "Oh, I can't believe how big he's gotten." So there's just like it's the same sort of personal connection you get there that you can, I mean, that Disney does, but just on a much more intimate and day-to-day scale.
Yeah.
And then I love their advertising too. You can spot their brand ads. I don't know that they need their brand ads, frankly, because I think they're such a strong brand, but those brand ads, you spot them a mile away. And
Yeah.
tell me one that hasn't made you cry, because I don't know one that hasn't, especially at the holidays. That doesn't, kind of get you going.
I love that. That's a great example. And it's a brand that you wouldn't think about, but I mean, you interact with them at least once a week, right?
Absolutely.
If not more. And it's great that you have a great experience when you do. And to your point, while Disney does perform amazing service, they don't know your name. They don't
Nope.
know your kid's name, and whereas your local Publix does,
Yeah.
and that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's a pretty consistent experience when you go. I mean, my parents will come here like, "Oh, we love your Publix," and they're only, they only come here a couple of times a year. And the other thing I love is it's their mission. I mean, they employ, I don't even know what they call it now. I want to say handicap, but it's not right.
Right.
What's
Oh, I
the
know.
phrase I'm
Oh,
thinking of?
absolutely. Yeah, I know. I can't think of the word either, but yeah,
Just
no,
that out.
absolutely.
You know what I'm talking
You're
about? But
right.
they stand by it. I mean, I mean, there are people there who, I mean, it's just amazing. They employ people who people might not think are employable elsewhere. And they're a huge part of your experience
Yep.
there.
And they're still pretty rigorous about um, picking good people that have the right qualities and character of what they're looking for, even if they may not be, mainstream
Right.
kind of employees for most companies.
Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, they've been consistent for 20 years
It's
and they're
amazing.
who they are.
I love that. All right. Well, so Amy Comeau is the Vice President of Marketing for Emory Healthcare. Thank you so much, Amy. This has been such an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.